Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Curious You podcast. Today's guest is someone whose story really touched me because it's about something that I myself as well truly deeply believe in, and it's that healing and purpose begin with care. Celine Ivari is the founder of Holy Me, a natural wellness brand that's changing how we think about pain and the body. Her background is in genetics and human biology. Quite impressive, Celine. She studied at UCL and Queen Mary University in London. She did research on anti aging and the science of human disease. But apart from this, what really drew me to Celine is her work, which actually began long before the lab, when she was just a little girl helping her mother navigate the pain of an autoimmune condition. Holy Me's natural remedies are now found in Whole Foods, Harrods, and pharmacies across the UK. But what stands out to me the most is actually Celine's philosophy, which is that true healing is about treating the whole person and not just the symptoms. Celine, welcome to the Curious You podcast. I'm truly honored to have you here with me today.
I'm honored to be here. Thank you so much for having me. And what an introduction.
But Celine, while I was reading your story, like I said in introduction, the image that I just couldn't shake was you as a little girl massaging your mom's joints. I mean, it's such a tender moment. And can you take us a bit back there? What did that moment teach you about care?
Wow. I was actually thinking about this and talking about it with my partner because he has a daughter from his first marriage and she just turned 9. And I was thinking, oh, wow, I remember that age so clearly. It was 9, 10 that it all started. My parents were very entrepreneurial, so we moved around a lot. I'm one of 5 daughters,
Oh,
6
wow.
kids actually,
5 daughters.
5 daughters, because my father was married once before my mother, and so I have a half brother,
Okay.
and then from my mother were 5 girls, and I'm the
Oh,
youngest
wow.
of
My
them.
husband's nightmare.
It's a lot. It's a lot of women. But I was the youngest of them, and we were living in Saudi Arabia, and then we moved back to Paris, which is where we call home because that's where we were all born. And um, at the time, not to get into all the details, but my father was held hostage in Saudi Arabia. My mother had to take over running the businesses that we had. It was clinics internationally and managing, 5 young children, teenagers, putting them all in new schools and it's in a new
God.
city and running all the businesses, trying to get him out of Saudi. It was a very difficult period in our lives, and I was very young. And I just remember seeing the pressure my mother was under, and I remember catching her call my grandmother and say, who lived in Iran at the time, crying and saying, like, I can't do it all on my own. I need you here. And so, my grandmother and my aunt, who's like a sister to me, moved to Paris and lived with us. And my mother, and this is also a moment very vivid and clear in my memory. My um, all my sisters had gone away for the summer. I was in Paris with my mother, and I remember my mother coming out of the kitchen and had these like red plaques on her arms, and she was like, "I don't know what this is," and being like a 9-year-old, who doesn't know very much about health, I was like, "Did you try to wash it? Like, maybe it's a stain, you know? Maybe it's just dirty." And she's like, "No, this is not that. It's not going." And then from there, everything deteriorated very fast, and she was, um, hospitalized. She was very sick for years, following that moment. It all went really quickly. And so she suffered from a condition that's autoimmune called psoriatic rheumatoid arthritis, but a very debilitating kind. And she doesn't actually have the gene for it. So it was very much the result of a stressful lifestyle that caused
Wow.
this. And she still worked really hard. She still stayed really positive. But what happened to me in that time in my life, and my sisters were older and teenagers, and they were going through their own things. I think I had created a narrative for myself that was, there's not a lot of capacity here for me. And I should be a source of light and joy and be useful and valuable because there's just too much going on. And I think that fundamentally in my essence I am a caregiver.
Wow. How old
And
were
so I just,
you?
I'm sorry.
How old were you when you
9, 10.
so 9, 10, and you thought like that?
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. A lot was going on. You grow up really quickly under certain
Wow.
environments. And I started really prioritizing my mother, like everything she would need. And I was hyper attuned to her needs, hyper observant to like, oh, we're making too much noise. We should be quiet. Like my sisters would call me grandma because I constantly was like, okay, stop, stop, stop. If I felt we were overwhelming her, she was tired, or she needed a bit of peace and quiet, and I was constantly monitoring what she needed.
Wow.
Um, and yeah, and I became a caregiver for about 4 years after that. Every single day, I would massage my mom's aching joints, just wanting to relieve her pain. Every night, I would pray that her pain would stop. And so it started then, my understanding of that, and I think that over the years, I actually developed my understanding of what true, deep, authentic care is, right? Starting from an understanding of care is self-sacrifice, care is basically love in action, right?
Yeah.
And to me, that was, it has to, until it is painful, it is not enough. So you have to give until you are depleted, until there is nothing left in you, until you get sick, and because that's sort of, I guess, what I was modeled, that this
Right.
life of self-sacrifice, of overgiving, of doing everything for everybody else. And I, later in my teenage years, myself struggled with a herniated disc in my lower back as a teenager. And it was so bad that I couldn't sit in a classroom. I was uncomfortable in cars. I couldn't lift anything. And remember thinking, like, I'm 17, 18. What's my life to be like if my back hurts this much? Right. And
Right.
the doctors were like, you need corticosteroid injections, you need surgery, you need a metal back brace. It was highly invasive procedures, which thankfully I didn't follow. I followed some of it, but not all of it, and I just took my health in my own hands. And it's not until much later in my life, honestly, very recently, that I realized that's not what care is. If you were to think of a spectrum of care, right? And you have on the far left, the people that are very focused selves. It's all about me. There's nothing else. There's no one else. And they can receive really well, but they can't give, right? You
Mm.
have that at this far extreme. And then on the right extreme, you imagine the neurotic caregivers. It's all about others. Can't receive anything, give until you're depleted.
Yeah.
And that's where I used to sit, right?
Oh, wow.
Exactly in the middle of this line graph is where deep authentic care lies. And I
Mm.
like to visualize a Venn diagram where you have two circles that meet, and it's
Mm.
this perfect flow of giving and receiving. And you
Right.
cannot be a giver if you can't receive. Because imagine you give to someone that won't receive it, right? Then your give is useless. Life works in this flow, and you have to give from overflow. And so the idea that actually authentic deep care lies in first listening to yourself, your body's natural messaging systems. Your body's constantly talking to you. So, what are
Mm,
aches, pain, tension, stress, fatigue? It's just your body's language. It's your body saying, hey, I need you to pay attention. And so, addressing those in a thoughtful, caring way rather than pouring through
yeah,
using medical solutions for lifestyle inherent issues. Can you care for yourself so that then you can show up authentically for others? So it starts with you, but it ripples far beyond measure.
I
And what
love
I
that.
perceive as care, to me, deep, authentic care, it is what fuels our human experience, right? You don't exist as an
Right.
individual, as a self. The self is an illusion. You
Mm,
exist through how you are received by others, right?
mm,
We are all connected, and what connects us all is when we care for each other.
yeah.
And so that sort of became a big mission of mine, understanding that at my core, I am a caregiver and that my life experiences have brought me to this point where I can share what the true power of deep, authentic care is. And so I started Holy Me with that mission in mind.
I love that, Celine. But whenever I think and imagine you as a child doing all of that, I can only imagine how hard it must have been for you. And I can't even begin to imagine actually how you felt and what was going on in your mind at that time. Can you guide us through how it feels to be a child and to take care of somebody else and how that influenced your upbringing and everything you did later on?
I think the reality is often when you are in a situation, at least the way I think I just function, um, I'm not one to dwell on the situation, I'm quite solution focused. And so
Mm,
actually I thrive on problem solving. So
mm,
I think it would have been a lot harder knowing my essence at my core if I was told, "You're a kid, you can't do anything. Leave us
mm,
alone," right?
right,
If I were to have been put in a powerless situation,
right.
I think I would have felt really hopeless just because it is literally in my nature to want to solve. And I do better when I feel like I have an understanding of the situation and there's something I can contribute. So, it's also the reality is, there is a sense of extreme ownership that is important in life, right? It's very easy to fall into a victim mindset of,
Yeah.
I was a kid, it wasn't my position, etc. But actually looking back, I also set the expectations. I also took on the roles that I wanted to
Mm,
take on, and
yeah.
that's also because it fed a need of mine, right?
Mm.
Which was a need to feel valued.
All
And
right.
so
Yeah.
being of service to my family was feeding this need of mine of feeling like I am valuable in the world. And so
Yeah.
I wasn't experiencing it as, oh, this is such a burden we're asking of me. Nobody asked it of me. I put myself in that position.
Mm,
And it brought me a lot
yeah.
to be that person in my family. And so it sort of became my role. And, both my grandmothers, I took care of them until, I mean, on their last days of their lives. I was by their side. I was looking after them. One of them, I'm the one who shut her eyes. Once she passed, I took care of my sisters. Like I
Wow.
just am fundamentally a
Yeah.
caregiver, and I think my family knows that, and so they're like, you are,
Yeah.
and and clearly need to do it. So yes,
So holy me is actually holy you.
Holy Me, the logo is like this. So the idea is we take the whole person into account, but it's Holy Me as in it starts with me, but it doesn't
Yeah.
end with me. It ripples far beyond measure. That's why you have that ripple sign.
Wow. That is incredible. I love that. I remember when I became a mom, my number one mission was to take my kids seriously. If my daughter tells me her pencil broke in school, I'm going to take that seriously.
Mm.
That was my number one thing. So going back to you, I guess giving something and for that to be received.
Oh,
in the
such a gift.
most valuable way, such a gift to you as well, because you
Totally.
understood what it means to help someone, to give, and how
Yep.
much you get as well internally from all of that, which is what you brought
Completely.
into calling
Completely.
me.
What I've
Yeah.
had to learn is to receive on my end.
Yeah.
I've had to learn to ask for help. I've had to learn to receive. And most importantly, I had to learn that care is not self sacrifice and
Mm.
actually having boundaries, and that actually looking after yourself and not pushing through when your mind thinks you should be doing more, but actually standing still and being soft is actually where our power lies. That is strength in a world that glorifies performance and delivery. We live in a world, especially if you're a founder, where it's all about performance, and there's so much applause to founders who, sleep in the garage of their
Yeah.
parents' home to start a startup and don't eat and don't drink and sleep under their wow, it's amazing, but it's not. And we're glorifying
Yeah.
um, the absence of care. And you have this one beautiful, precious life. It doesn't have to be painful because the world applauds you
Yeah.
living through pain. And that understanding of actually what is powerful is our care. And how can you build a culture around care? How can you build a team around care? How can
Mhm.
you care for the planet as you're sourcing and harvesting your ingredients from it? How do you produce things that are extremely effective but don't compromise your long term health ever? Get people to tune in with themselves so that
Mm.
they can show up more authentically for others. That's powerful. And so for me, it's been, yes, it was a gift to be able to give and to add value and to feel like I am someone who
Mhm.
wants to add value and to serve and to have a purpose. My purpose expanded beyond my family I want to serve the world. But understanding that I had to readjust. I'm not a
Yeah.
neurotic caregiver. I care from overflow and not depletion.
Yeah. And when did you learn to receive?
Great question.
Because I think
When
that's a very important question. I mean, a lot of us, I would say, are unable to receive
Yeah,
love, to receive.
completely. And we don't even really know it. A lot of it is in hindsight. You can look back and say, "Oh, I can see how, I thought I knew, but I didn't."
Mm.
And it's always about increasing your awareness
Yeah.
and understanding your own patterns and doing your own introspection so that you understand your behavioral patterns, because
Right.
with awareness your optionalities to change your behavior now, because it's in your conscious awareness, exists, right? Which is why
Yeah.
we say raise your awareness, change your life, right?
Right. Yeah.
I think for me there's a few things. Partly, so one of the things I had done for a long time, I really just lived for my mother. The one goal I had was to support my mother.
Mm.
And she actually had a very unhealthy relationship with my father, and so I supported her along with my sisters, not on my own. I supported her in a big transition in her life, which is when she decided to leave my father, and she moved to London. We set up a hair loss clinic together, and so I was supporting her in all these transitions, and I had reached a point where I think I felt, she was ill again and I was looking after her and then she got better. And I think I had reached a point in my life where I felt like, okay, she's no longer in an unhappy marriage. She is running her own clinic here in London and it's doing well. And she has her team that she's built and set up, and she runs it the way she wants to run it. She has her home. And so from this point on, unless I choose that my life is to be my mother's caregiver, she's in a good place.
Yeah.
And I don't feel like she is in self-sacrifice anymore. I don't feel like
Mm.
she is stuck in a place. I feel like her life is now her choice, right? Which before there was a narrative of, I'm in this marriage and I can't really leave it and all of that. So whatever those stories were, I felt like they were no longer true in that point in my life. I was in a relationship for many years that wasn't working, and I felt like I was fighting with all I had to make this relationship work, but it wasn't working, and I was fighting for it on my own, which was exhausting.
Mm.
And a lot of other things were happening in my life, and I think I just started scanning my life for outside of being my family's caregiver. Am I, and what do I want to do with my one precious life? And that's when the idea for Holy Me actually started. And I do think there is not much that beats starting your own startup to take a hard look at yourself,
Oh,
right?
yeah. Of course.
Like it is a growth journey because you start and for me, I realized I have a very, effective product, that at that time we have, which we still have is our hero product, the balm for muscles and joints and bath salts. I have products where the formula is really unique, really effective. The price point's decent, the branding, which looked different at the time, was decent. So, and there's definitely a need, there's definitely a demand. So outside of ticking these boxes, the only reason it isn't growing is me. And how am I
Mm.
standing in my own way? And
Mhm.
what do I need to change about potentially things that are in my subconscious that I'm not even aware of?
Right.
And I started diving deeply into my subconscious through a variety of modalities. I really have tried a variety of modalities, and it brought a lot to my awareness. And I think I started understanding what actual deep care is then, why I was behaving. And it also changed this, living for my family, because that's when I was like, "Oh, but you're doing this not because you have to or you need to. You're doing this because actually deeply you're getting value from it, right? It's
Mhm.
validating you. And the only
Right.
way is to stop needing that validation so that
Mhm.
I don't feel the need to continue doing that."
I wanted to ask you before we dig into Holy Me and the work you did on your subconsciousness, because I think that's very important. Talk about that for everyone who's listening. I saw that, or I read somewhere that you were the one actually blending those oils yourself at home. Can you talk a bit more about that? How, first of all, how did you come to the idea of blending those specific oils? And take us through the journey of what it means to start your own business and to believe in yourself and to knock on people's doors and to believe in that product like
Yeah.
nothing else exists in this world. Can you walk us through that process?
Of course. So it was very much the chapter in my life where, we set up the hair loss clinic here for my mother, and she actually got a flare up in her condition that had been dormant for well over a decade at that point. And I just wanted to help her. So I was doing a lot of research. I was, going to all her doctor's appointments, reading all the charts and everything. And in that research, I was also looking for, just a holistic approach to health. What could she do outside of these medications to feel empowered that she's in charge of her own health? And I started digging more into scientific papers with natural solutions. And as I would look for these natural solutions in the market, I didn't find something that combined every single ingredient that I wanted, with no diluters, with no synthetics, with nothing unnecessary. I couldn't find that. Everything
Yeah,
had like
yeah,
one active ingredient diluted in things that are completely unnecessary. And so I was like, how can I have a formulation that has no diluters, absolutely nothing that doesn't have evidence to support what it is I'm trying to support?
yeah.
Um, and I started experimenting really at the time for her, and that came up with the formulations. And then from there, I it was my journey of deciding to do my startup Holy Me at the start. I I can't even explain it. It was not it's something that I resisted because at the time, I felt a huge sense of responsibility towards my family, and
Mm.
I felt like if I left the clinic to do my own venture, they would feel like I abandoned them. And I had all these stories I told
Right.
myself about how I couldn't do that to them. And so I actually like didn't tell anyone, kept it a secret, but it was almost something in me that was pounding, not letting me sleep at night. I was like, you have to do this. You have to go and do your own thing. It's now. It's now. And I just couldn't like, I couldn't sleep at night, so I had to go on this, it was
Your
very much
calling.
beyond me. It was very much a calling, and so it started very slow, just testing the theory out. At the time, I went on Facebook. I was like, "Does anyone know anyone that wanna participate in a study for a month where we assess, pain assessment scores?" People started reaching out to me. The first idea was actually quite different. It was a subscription box for people with arthritis specifically, with like dietary restrictions, like dietary advice, supplements, topicals, etc. And so the idea was that these would be subscription boxes for the natural side of chronic conditions, and we would
Mhm.
start testing it with arthritis. That was the initial idea. And we started testing it out, and people were like, our favorite thing in the box is this formula that actually helps applying it locally. And so I was like, actually, let's just hone down on this one product,
Mm.
and not make it for conditions, because actually it's understanding that there is so much your body speaks to you very subtly before it screams. So before it becomes a medical condition, there are things your body tells you that you are suppressing, that you are ignoring, and that's where we should be addressing
Mm.
things, in lifestyle, not when you're so far along that you need
Right.
medical intervention. Um, and so that was the beginning, and I have to say it was I what I didn't expect in going on my own journey. So it wasn't an alien concept to be a founder. In my family, everyone's a founder. My parents are entrepreneurs. My sisters are entrepreneurs. So it was very much something we do. So the
Mhm.
idea of starting a company was not daunting,
Okay.
but the idea of leaving my family, for me, I didn't realize or anticipate the amount of guilt that would come with abandoning the version of myself attached to. And that
Mhm.
was unbelievably difficult. The
Yeah.
hardest thing in my startup was that.
I love that. I love that. I think that we all have that moment where we have to say goodbye to
An old
the
version of
past
our
version of ourselves in order to be able to move on. And it is a grief moment. I mean, now when I look back at photos of myself 5 years ago, it's a bittersweet moment. You know that girl, you know how she was, you know how she thought, but she no longer exists. And I think it's a grief moment not only for you, but for the people around you as well. It's
For
hard on
sure.
them.
For sure. It's a lot. That's why I had actually done a post on Instagram about guilt, like we
Yeah.
don't talk about the guilt that
No.
comes with growth, and
Yeah.
how, it's really difficult to shed the version of yourself you used to be. And with that, you feel like you're abandoning others, but it's
Yeah.
only the version of, because of course it comes with changes, and it comes with people having to adjust to a new dynamic. And that feels like abandoning others, but it's not. And on the other side of this guilt, and on the other side of this fear, is your freedom, is all the
Mm,
things you actually
yeah.
want.
And how did you mix that guilt with believing in yourself every day so strongly that you were able to raise a company?
One of the things I always come back to, and actually it loops back to your question about receiving that I was going to get
Mhm.
to, but this does answer.
Mhm.
One of the things that has completely um, transformed me. And I always say now to people starting their startups, like, find your believers, find your cheerleaders. And again, I really don't believe we exist as individuals. We exist
Mhm.
how we are received.
Mhm.
And I met someone actually at the clinic, at the time, who became a very, very close friend, and who became an investor in my startup.
Yeah.
And I can only say I have a few investors, but this one person in my life, I can say, well beyond, feels like a guardian angel. I'm sure there is a past life connection there,
Yeah.
because I have never felt more seen, more cared for, more, cheered than having met this person who is extremely successful, unbelievably smart, and extremely selective over who he brings in his close circle. It's a very small, close circle. And for some reason, this person saw something in me and has believed in me, and I actually always say now, so find your believers, because I have experienced it. When you have someone that believes in you in that way, it gives you wings
Oh, yeah.
and you learn to receive. So at the beginning, I didn't even trust it. I was like, what, why? 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 Some, like maybe I'll get bored after a while and not want to be my friend anymore. Or maybe there's an
Yeah.
alternative motive. Or you tell yourself all these stories. This
Mm,
person stays steady. And you're like, no, this is it. This person sees something in you. And if even you don't see it because they see it, you start being like, whatever it is you see in me, I want to be that.
mm,
You learn to receive and you set the bar high for yourself.
right. Well,
But that
after
was
years of giving, giving, and giving, I think that was the natural
the
solution,
gift.
natural result of all of that for you to
That's
happen.
also what I had told them. I feel like I
Yeah.
did all that I had done, and
Yeah,
then I gifted this guardian
exactly.
angel.
Yeah, exactly. I love that. I also saw you were saying how there came a moment where you almost gave up.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, it was really hard. Uh,
At what
a
point did
nervous
that
laugh.
come and how did
You're
it
taking
feel?
me back. I have a nervous laugh. There was a time where, and at the starts, you asked about the journey. I only spoke a little bit about like the organic growth of it and that
Mhm.
inner calling, but it was huge hustle at the beginning for me. That COVID hit.
Oh,
You had
yeah.
all the wars, you had all the inflations, you have supply chain issues, you had all the issues you could possibly have beyond the normal issues you have in a startup. Um, that made everything challenging, and actually impossible, and you didn't know how long it was gonna last, so you didn't know how long you needed to survive for, right?
Mm.
And I would go the only thing that was open at the time in London were small independent pharmacies. I would go door to door to small independent pharmacies with my mask on and pitch my products, and I would just sell balms
I
and
love that.
salts to the pharmacies, and, like, I remember, like, getting 5 and being like, "I'm winning." Um, so it was very much of a hustle, door to door, etcetera, and there came a time where I was really drained. I was exhausted. People around me at the time, a lot of people around me were like, a lot of friends were like, "Oh, how long are you going to carry this on for? It's
Mm.
just not a very sexy topic." Some of my investors were like, "Oh, we're not seeing the growth we want to see. We're going to sit on the sidelines and see how things evolve." My relationship had ended
Oh, wow.
that I had been in for like 8 years.
Testing from every side.
Yeah, everything was falling apart, and I was running out of capital, and I was like, I don't even know on what narrative I'm supposed to go fundraise now. I was alone. I didn't have a team. I worked from home. There was not, it was stale. and
Yeah.
and I felt like I was fighting really hard for very, very little reward.
Mm.
And it was exhausting. And I remember being a little bit depressed. Like I struggled. I feel like it's not fair to say depressed because I wasn't probably the actual term depressed, but I I was tired. I
Yeah.
would struggle to stay awake, and I would really want to sleep through the tough times. I was like, "Oh, I wish I could just curl up and wait for the storm to pass." And what happened that time? Well, my one guardian angel never stopped believing in me. Never.
I
Even when
love
I
that.
believed in myself, everybody else seemingly stopped believing in me. And, I would go in tears. I remember this one catch up with him. I had these tears and I was like, I don't know what you see in me. I don't know. Like,
No.
I didn't,
I love
I
it.
didn't understand. And, he was extremely kind and patient and, um, showed me what it was he saw in me, I remember him being like, "You're one of the strongest women I've ever met, and if anyone can do this, it's you." And,
I have goosebumps, literally. Wow, that
lucky.
is such a gift.
I can't believe it. And so I remember going home and writing a letter to myself. I wrote an agreement to myself, and I wrote this really harsh letter. You've been at this for years. What have you achieved? No significant growth. You don't have a team. You're running out of capital. What are you doing? Blah, 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 like harsh. And I was like, okay, I'm giving you one more year, and if you don't achieve exactly these things, and so there was like X amount of revenue a month, X amount fundraised, like at least two new team members and two like major accounts, one, you close shop. And then I went on my calendar and I marked a year from the date of that letter, and then 6 months before the end of that, before the year. So it's a half point check in where there's a check-in point, because I also knew that if nothing had changed within those 6 months, I actually had 6 months to wrap things up and figure out my life, right? Because I didn't
Mhm,
have like savings or a partner to share rent with. Like I was doing everything myself. So yeah, I would have had to figure out my
mhm.
life in the last
So
six
was
months.
that, sorry for interrupting, just to clarify, was that the first, as far as I understood, the first few years you were doing everything quite intuitively, right? Trying
Yeah.
to get your product into pharmacies, into shops, and this was actually when you wrote that letter, the first time you sort of created a vision for yourself.
I probably, in a funny way, I think writing the letter did two things.
Mhm,
I always had a vision. I mean, you have forecasts, you have plans, right? So,
mhm,
in a funny way, the letter had a dual effect. One was I was now detached from it has to succeed, right? So
mm,
an attachment cord was released of
mm,
an expected outcome, and if I don't have that outcome, then I was no longer attached to it. So there was a sense of I can let this go, right?
oh, wow.
Although I deeply didn't want to, but
Yeah.
writing this letter sort of made that a and secondly, I really didn't want this to stop, and it felt really aligned with my truth. So it kind of set fire
Mm,
um, to me and gave me the energy that I needed, because I now had a timeline. And it was like break it or make it. So I wasn't gonna die gently. I was gonna
mm,
go hard or go home. And so it gave me the energy for the next few months to um literally spend every dime I had on this one trade show. I had
mm,
honestly, it was a ridiculous experience. The trade stand itself was like £5,000, and I had another £5,000 to decorate the is a build it yourself kind of stand, but it normally costs you like 20,000 to build
mhm.
that size of a stand that I had. And I literally sat down and called a bunch of build companies, and I was like, this is my situation. I'm either I have 5K, it's yours if you want to do it for me. And then if it works out, I'll have more trade shows. So this is an investment in a potential future together.
I love that.
But I have nothing else. So this is not like a negotiation. I am giving you what I have. And a
Oh,
bunch of them were like, you're crazy. Even if you had the money, you're too late. Like, no. And I did this. I don't know how many companies I called until one of them was like, you know what? Something intuitively makes me feel like you can do this and I want to help you. And this company did it. And I prepared for this trade show like my life depended on it. I knew every single buyer that came. I knew their faces. I knew where they went to school. I knew where they lived. I knew what their previous jobs were. I had flashcards. I knew their names because I didn't want to like look at their name tags, right? I wanted to
mm,
recognize their faces. So I had flashcards with their face and their whole backgrounds in the back. And I had personalized gift boxes for each of them, even though they didn't like tell me they didn't know me, but I had gift boxes if I spotted them, and I emailed them all and messaged them all. I did all the things, and then I went to the trade show ready and certain that it would work out, and that's when we won, like, Boots, and we won Holland& and Barrett, and then we won a Whole Foods, and so we won like, we went from, being in 30 small independent retailers, and in 1 year to 2,000. So it really grew.
Wow.
Um, and so I had my 6-month check-in where, because that trade show went well, I was able to fundraise on the premise that I have these accounts, they're done, they're
Mm,
secured, I just need the capital to actually deliver the growth that is on demand.
yeah.
I was able to hire people to deliver on these things. I had the major accounts and the revenue came. And so suddenly everything I had listed on the letter within the 6-month window happened.
You went all in, as they say, all or nothing, and that was your
Yeah.
year of that. But it's such a funny, I mean, not a funny, it's an incredible life story because I
Mm.
feel like a lot of people that I talk to that have their own businesses have this experience of knocking on doors, of cold calling, and of really being persistent and stubborn in what they want. And I
Yes.
guess as an entrepreneur, you reach a moment where you get angry. You're like, I believe in this so much. This will work. This has to
Mhm.
work. And you sort of flip the page from, oh, let's see if it works. Is this beautiful vision that I have to, no, this will work. Like I'm going to give it my all. And I think in that moment, when you cross that line, you're ready to invest all the money you have. You're ready to risk
Mhm.
everything. And I feel like that's when people mostly make it because a lot of them would give up in your situation. You know, how long have
Mm.
you been doing this for? Like 2 years before the trade show?
Figured, yeah.
2 years, right? A lot of people would give up, especially when people from your surroundings start asking you, "How's it going?" It's not going really well, is it? Like,
Yeah.
"Are you making sales? Are you not?" And it's very hard what you went through. I mean, to have that mental strength of, "No, I will make it."
Yeah, I think persistence is
Yeah.
the key, right? It's the underrated key. You can have the best idea, you can have the best plans, you can have the best branding, you can have the best product. If you're not persistent, it's just
Mm,
not going to work. And um yeah, persistence is key. Having believers around you will fuel you, will give you the fuel you need. Um, and I think also not expecting to know the way,
yeah.
you won't know. You go, and the path will show itself as you are on it. You're not gonna see clearly before. It's very much this, Joseph Campbell, Go on Your Hero's Journey. One
Mm,
of my favorite books, Hero with a Thousand Faces, is all about mythology, the power and importance of mythology and psychology, and going on your own hero's journey. And
mm,
I think in that, you'll figure it out as you
yeah,
go along. Most people are stopped with, "It's not the right time," with all the excuses for,
mm,
"I just don't know where to start." Nobody knows where to start.
yeah,
Nobody. You just start, and then you'll figure it out.
precisely. Precisely. Clarity comes from action, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. There's a saying, new level, new devil. After you've crossed
Mm.
that mark, what happened then?
You know what? I actually think that the real hustle is when you keep trying when nothing's working. That's the real hustle. The rest gives you energy. Once you it's still a hustle, it's still hard work, there's still fires to solve, there are still problems for you to solve, but you are growing and there is a clearer path. There are
Mm,
wins along the way, and those wins fuel you and you just keep going. The path is slightly clearer.
mm,
I think it's when you try everything and it doesn't work, and you have to find the will and the strength to keep trying, and you're on your own and you don't know what to try, and like that's the hustle, right?
mm,
Those beginnings are the hustles. But yes, in terms of how we handle the problems now, I find problem solving fun, and
yeah,
when you have a team, you kind of figure it out together. So we still have real challenges with, like, supply chain and getting the margins right, and you
yeah,
open new markets, you have new compliance, you have new um it's more volume team. There's a lot, like, these days there is a lot of content to share across a lot of different platforms. But also, we live in a world where now we have AI, and it makes your life a lot easier. There's a lot of things that used to take you many, many hours, that now will take minutes, right? Like reviewing a legal document,
All
you know,
right.
like,
Yeah.
um,
Have you
so
implemented AI into your company?
we use it a lot. We use it a
Mhm.
lot for various reasons, like reviewing legal documents and things that would take a really long time. I use AI for that. I try to encourage the team as much as I can and myself to use technology to as a tool to eliminate um the burden of things that are not our zone of genius or of
Mhm.
interest and that feel really boring.
Right.
That, a lot of administrative tasks, a lot of filtering through things, like use these tools so that you can focus on what we as humans are actually really good at, and that is our
Mhm.
creativity, right? How can we care more as as a business? How can we um, create content, spend more time on the creative side of our expression and what we're building and the products, and less time on the things that are time
Right.
consuming, use tools now to just replace.
Mm. And talking about your brand, what would you say is the vision you have for Holy Me for the future?
The mission for us is to be the number one brand for self-care, but really beyond that, because our mission is to share the power of care, we say to help 1% of the global population address their body's signals in a healthy way. That is the bigger mission of the brand.
And have you had any feedback from the people using your product, how effective it
Oh,
is?
amazing feedback. We're
Yeah.
so lucky. The one thing that I'd say is because I never had enough capital when I fundraise, it was never so
Mm.
substantial that I could try marketing stunts and just like a lot of it had to be based on um people's response to the products, and
Mm.
even the distribution that we got. It's not because I have a huge amount of following, it's not because we got incredible influencers talking about our products, it's not because of a PR event, it's
Yeah.
not. It's purely because the products are effective, and that has gone around and has meant we got the distribution that we got. So, even being in Boots as a pharmaceutical, we're in the pharmacy section of Boots. Being in being a pharmacy, number one need is efficacy at all cost,
Mhm.
right? Holland and Barrett, it's great to be there for visibility and reach and trust, but it's natural at all cost, right? And so being at Boots was a real testament to the efficacy of our products. So for us, that was a the key to our
Yeah.
growth has been the feedback we've received and how effective the remedies are.
Celine, I'd love to go back a bit to your education because I think there's a very interesting thing that I want to talk to you about. You've studied genetics, and I wanted to ask you if the way we're born and the way our genetics are set up, is that something that conveys how our life will be, or can our external environment actually influence our genetics?
Great question. So that is one of the reasons I went into studying genetics, because when I studied human biology first, and then I went into genetics, I was amazed by the understanding that yes, this is a never-ending question, right? Nature versus nurture.
Mm.
Um, I was amazed that you are born with a set of codes that define your physiology and your predisposition to conditions, etc. But you have epigenetics, right? What epigenetics is a layer that sits over your genetic makeup, so your DNA code. And that epigenetic layer, it fluctuates according to your lifestyle, and it causes methylation, which means that basically the way your gene expression works is you have a code on your DNA, and a protein will bind to it, and the cellular expression will happen, and the cellular response will mean a physiological response will occur. But if you cover that code, then the protein can bind to it, right? And so you can have a disposition to something, but if now it is covered, it won't ever be activated. And that covering can also be um, transferred to the next generations. So the epigenetic factor is really, really interesting in genetics and super empowering to know that actually you are not just the result of your genetic makeup and there's nothing you can do. Your environment is going to define your odds of recovery and the expression of your genes.
But in today's world, for example, we all live a very fast-paced life, right? We're stuck with our screens, we're always rushing towards something, and just having that, knowing it consciously that our whole environment influences everything that's inside of us. Like, how do
Mhm.
you live with those two conflicting factors, to make sure that your environment is supportive? What do you do for yourself?
So that's our big mission, right? To
Yeah.
encourage people to reconnect with their bodies because the reality is your body is constantly talking to you. And so if you just carve out time to be still and to feel what your body is communicating with you, you will know what to do. And of course, there's so many different modalities, right? Some people use meditation, some people use journaling, some people use baths, some people use saunas. It doesn't really matter how you care for yourself, but you use the modality that works for you. Our products are all about using, like the balm is about using the power of touch
Yeah.
to have products that have relieving properties, but also encourage you to connect with your body's messaging systems and relieve it with really healthy products that you can use every single day. So the encouragement is to listen to your body and actually be still and pause and slow down and don't be under the pressure of the world
Mm,
expecting you to perform all the time. And the most radical act is actually to not give in to that pressure
yeah.
and to be still and listen to your body and care for it in a thoughtful way and actually understand that that is not selfish. That is the most caring thing you will ever do for anyone you care about is care for yourself
Really?
first. So that they're not then put in a situation where they need to
Yeah,
care for you because you failed to do it yourself, you know?
I love that. Yeah, very true. Are you a spiritual or religious person?
I have definitely developed my spiritual side over the last few years.
In what way, may I ask?
Of course. Um, in many ways, and in some ways it's gonna sound extremely cheesy, but,
Let's do it.
um
Let's go. We
do
love
it.
cheesy shit.
I think that when I've always been, thankfully, very grateful. I've always been grateful for I think also growing up in and witnessing someone struggle with their mobility and have all these aches. It makes you very grateful for the simple, simple things we might take for granted,
Yeah.
which is the simple functioning of your body. And I started feeling this extremely young because I saw my mother struggle. I would walk up the stairs and think, I'm so lucky I can do this easily. You know, I would dance and think, I'm so lucky I get to move my body. I'm so lucky. I'm so lucky and I started really having this approach to life, and I think when you see the beauty in life, it just feels, um, it feels designed.
Yeah.
It feels like there is if you choose to see the magic in life, it really is magical beyond belief.
Mm,
And the fact that we get to have this human experience and that we get to be here and connect with people and see this beautiful world, it it feels truly magical and spiritual. It feels like a spirit we're spirits having human experiences. And nothing has felt more spiritual than this. I'm terrified of saying this on a podcast, but than actually falling in love. Like actually
oh.
falling in love is a deeply spiritual experience, I think.
Are you in love, Celine?
I am.
Oh. That's the most beautiful feeling in the world,
Yes,
definitely,
it is.
definitely. But yeah, talking about spirituality, for me, it was a similar journey because I grew up in India as a child. And I remember before even starting school, we would do meditation in the morning, we would do yoga, we would sort of connect with ourselves even as kids. And that was
Mm.
such an integral part of growing up for me. But then after India, we moved back to Europe. We moved back home to Bosnia. And all of those topics, like people didn't understand. And I remember when I was in school, we had a
Mm.
class of geography, and I didn't even speak well my own language because I was going to local Indian school. So I was using English and Hindi. So when I came back, I had to learn how to speak my own language, which was so
Mm.
funny. And then I was at a geography class and the teacher asked, "Who can tell me what is the natural resource of Finland?" And nobody was raising their hands, and I raised my hand, and the teacher proudly was like, "Yes, Nina, go, you tell us what is the natural resource of Finland." And she was so proud. And I stood up and I was like, "Life."
I
Silence in the
love that.
class.
Oh, beautiful.
At one point, everyone started laughing. I was labeled as the life girl. Like, that was the end of
What a
me,
beautiful label to have.
right? But I always went back to that situation as I was growing up. And now, I'm in my 30s, and it's incredible that when I was 12, I was
Mm.
seeing life in that way and how important that was for who I am today. Because at one point, I disregarded all of that because people were laughing, you know how it is when you're a kid. And I started believing that all of that is crazy. I had to come back
Mm.
to the real life. I had to be rational. I had to, participate in the 3D world
Like
more than
life
I participate.
way too short to be rational.
Oh yeah. Now I know that. Now I know that. But for a few years, I didn't. When I was studying law as well, you're surrounded by completely different types of people, right? Like
Yeah.
conversations are different. And whenever I would enter these kind of conversations, it would always be like, Nina and her deep conversations. It would be a
Oh, you're
joke.
like me.
Yeah, like me, the life girl. Let's talk about that. But I think it's a very important topic, especially in business context, because
Mm.
um, having that faith and knowing that
Yeah.
there is something bigger than you is such a freeing moment. Like nothing
Yep.
is important. Nothing is as important that you have to stress about. You just have to zoom out. And when I was a child, my dad gave me the best advice. And he was like, "Nina, whenever you're stressed, just zoom out. Just zoom
Mm.
out of your body, out of the town you live in, out of the
Beautiful.
country, go up, up, up. Oh, you're above, you're not on Earth anymore. Do you see the moon? Go even further up. Now
Wow.
look at your problem. How does it look like?"
That's beautiful.
And for me, that was
Perspective.
life-changing. Yeah,
It's so
it was
true. And I
yeah.
think when you actually, and this is why also still is so incredibly important. And, Joseph Campbell says it's being still, if you have the luxury to find a place that you can be still in, that is where, that is your time of creative incubation. It is
Mm,
where all your creative ideas come. And the more you are still, the more you do feel guided, the more you have this, wait, hold on, I can switch off my reasoning mind and I have something that's far more intuitive that is guiding me. And if I can know with absolute certainty that it's all going to work out in my interest, even if I don't know, can you really believe that what you really want, you don't even know yet?
mm,
Go with that approach in
yeah,
life and just trust that everything is happening in your best interest. That
yeah,
feels like a spiritual experience, right?
definitely.
And you have to let go of control. And the
Mm,
only reason you seek control is because you have anxiety and you want to
mm,
protect your anxiety.
yeah,
And the only way to actually bypass that, what's much more powerful than fear is hope, right?
yep, very true. I don't know if you've read Joe Dispenza's books or if you've listened to him or if you
I
know
have.
who he is. Yeah.
Yes, yes, yes.
We went for his retreat, and it was a very powerful moment of
Yeah.
actually thinking about your future, but even going a step further and feeling the emotions the future you feels in the future.
Yeah. Makes sense.
And for me, that was mind blowing because I realized that it's what I've been doing my entire life. I just didn't put a name to it. Like, I remember whatever decision I made in life, I first felt the future. Like, I felt the emotions I would feel when that situation happens. And
Beautiful.
whatever happens in my surrounding, I don't care. I'm going towards that because I felt it. And when I lived in Moscow, I was studying law. I was supposed to move to London actually to study at Queen's Mary University. We could have
Mm.
met there.
Oh,
I got a scholarship and everything was set. And in the last moment, I changed my mind and I said, no, I'm going to Brussels. Everyone around me was like, Nina, Brussels is cold, it's rainy, it's boring, politicians, no, 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 no. And I said, no, I don't care. I'm going. I have a feeling that I need to be there because I already felt my life in Brussels. That was the end of story. I didn't have a rational explanation of why I need to be there. I just knew that I
got
needed
it.
to be there. And now I know why I needed to be there. All of that led me to this life with my husband, with my kids, with
Beautiful.
new realizations about everything. But when I was at that retreat, and when I learned that all of that is also part of the quantum physics of things that we can't really see, but that
Mm.
exist, things that are proven, I was like, what you know, you cannot unknow. With this
Never.
information, your life changes, and all you can do is really keep connecting to that version of yourself.
Totally. And if you can trace things back, very often you can absolutely go, oh, yeah, no, all these things happened exactly how they needed
Yeah.
to happen
Oh, yeah.
for me to be here now. And for me, like going on my hero's journey, going through the guilt, going against the grain of what people expected of me, what my family expected of me, what was the norm in my
Yeah.
life, going against that was so hard and so painful. And at times I thought I was making a mistake, but now I look at my life and I'm like, this is the dream. I'm living my
Mm,
dream. And I am surrounded by people. The more authentic I am, the more I am surrounded by people that like me. And they are
yeah.
there. And I feel so, I was overwhelmed yesterday. I was telling my partner, I was like, I feel like I'm surrounded by angels. I'm
Oh,
surrounded
wow.
by tons of angels. And
That's
I
so
feel so
beautiful.
lucky. So lucky, yeah.
That is absolutely beautiful. And when you realize that you almost didn't make it to the other side, that becomes so scary, right? Like, I
Yeah,
almost didn't take those steps that brought me here. And you look around yourself and you feel grateful for the life you've built. So that's
totally.
an incredible thing.
Constantly going back to now that I've lived the life I've lived so far, it is true. Fear keeps you small, and everything you have ever
Mhm.
wanted is on the other side of fear.
Oh, yeah.
That's
Oh,
so
yeah.
true.
A lot of times we think that if it doesn't feel right, if it feels like stress, it's not for me. It's not my intuition tells me it's better to stay here, but it's actually your brain pulling you back into your
Yeah,
comfort
yeah,
zone.
what's the difference between your fear and your intuition?
Yeah.
And actually, that's another thing I was thinking about so much, these days, because I actually think there's a huge rise, in the spirituality world, and I actually think some of it is not real spirituality, it's bypass, you know? We're using
Mhm.
spirituality as
Yeah.
yet another crutch or a tool to bypass
Yes.
hard things. You know, you hear
Mhm.
it all the time. It should flow. Things should be
Yeah.
effortless. If it's
Yeah.
not effortless, then it isn't for you. And I
Mhm.
think some people actually go with this, like, oh, it feels forced, so it isn't for me. But I don't believe that that is where the meaning lies in life. It's
No.
the meaning is not it flows effortlessly, therefore it is meaningful. The meaning lies in you standing rooted in your truth through the hard times, through the hurdles. That is where the meaning lies, right? It's
Exactly. Yeah.
meaningful only because you go through it aligned with what is true to you. So
Mm.
it's not it is easy or hard that makes it right or wrong.
That is so true. It's exactly what I was thinking about and talking with my husband. We were at a retreat a couple of months ago, And I think it was a more spiritual type of retreat, and everybody was talking about the necessity to retreat from towns and cities and to live,
Mm,
with the nature, with organic food and all of that, which is beautiful. But I was telling my husband how in reality, it's easy to live that type of life, right? When I'm in the forest, I feel at peace. I feel
yeah.
really, really good. The green calms
Mm,
me, brings the best out of me.
mm,
But I would take it a step further to say that having that skill, having that spirituality, when you're in a
mm,
skyscraper, and filled
correct.
with obligations and stress and all of these things
Mm,
that we live in 2025, and having the ability to stay calm and to zone out,
mm,
connect with something higher,
mm,
that's the kind of spirituality that I want.
beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Glad we agree, Celine. I
me
have
too.
two more questions for you before we
Yeah.
end. I could continue like this for hours with
Me
you.
too.
There's
I'm
so many
loving chatting.
questions. I wanted to ask you before we go on to the last question, intuition or strategy? How do you do business?
Ooh. I mean, it's I don't and my answer is probably a bit boring. I think it's not either or.
Yeah.
I am
The
a
truth is
very
always in the middle.
yeah. I am a very conviction-led type of person. I think even starting a business, it's based on intuition and conviction,
Mhm.
less I mean, especially if it's your first time, right? And then you try things, and then you analyze the results and build your strategy according to your learnings. So I think they go hand in hand, but I am very conviction-led still.
Mhm. Yeah. Truth is always in the middle. So I completely agree with you. And I think in the beginning, it's more about using your intuition to sort of feel your path and where you're going. But later on,
And then you
nothing without.
try things. I mean, that's
Yeah,
that's what that's why startups are risky. That's why, you have to be a little bit crazy to be a founder.
exactly.
It's
Oh,
because
yeah.
you take a massive risk. You're like, "I think that that's what's gonna happen," and you,
Yeah.
like, put a strategy in place to test it, and then you edit your strategy based on your learnings. So you just mix things.
Last question for today,
Mhm.
Celine. And this one is for the listeners. What would you tell a woman who's on her way to build her best life, to live an authentic life, to start something of her own, and to just go for it? What would you tell her if
Oh,
you were
a
sitting
woman
next
very
to
specifically, I would say for a woman very specifically, I would say never forget where your power lies. And the world needs women to lead as women. And it's tricky to say male, woman, female. Like at
you?
your
Yeah.
core, if you are feminine, that is where your power lies in leadership. Because the
Mhm.
feminine, which we both have masculine and feminine, but we have a lot of women leading in their masculine in the world. And what the
Mhm.
world actually needs is feminine leaders because be fearlessly devoted to a cause while simultaneously really caring and being nurturing for others. And that is what makes an exceptional leader. And that lies in your feminine. So I would always encourage women, don't lean on your masculine because that is glorified in society. What makes you an extraordinary leader is your feminine. So lead with your feminine. And we need more feminine leaders in this world.
I love that. That's so beautiful. And I completely agree with you. Celine, thank you so much for joining me today, for finding time out of your busy schedule. I honestly and from the heart enjoyed our conversation, and I feel like I
You.
could talk to you for ages.
Thank you.
And
Thank you
thank
for
you
everything
to,
with me.
of course, of course. And thank you to all the listeners who took your time to be with us here today. And I will see you next week, same time, same place. Bye.